All right.
All right.
You ready, Joe?
Yes.
Thank you so much for letting us turn the tables on you.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
We're here, Joe. How
Now
are
I'm
you?
nervous.
Get ready.
Oh, no.
So appropriate for our show, we want to start by asking you, like, how do you think about your political philosophy and who do you consider to be some of the influences on how you think about those things?
My political philosophy is very mixed, right? It's like I like a lot of different people's ideas, but ultimately all I really want is what's better for people. You know, I don't really have a vested interest in business. I'm not looking to like protect assets or anything weird, and I want people to have freedom. So in all ways, you know, and I think that when I look at politics, I look at like these utopian concepts about like what's possible, and then I look at what we have going on right now, and I wonder.
Joe, what are some of the formative political experiences of your life?
Well, I mean, I remember the first time I really got interested in politics was when Ronald Reagan couldn't remember whether or not he sold arms to Iran.
Iran-Contra.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like 21 years old, 21 years old. And I remember thinking like, what is happening? Because I always thought of presidents as, you know, you have a leader and this leader is trying to do the best for the country and we all respect the office of the president. And back then that was really the case. Like back then in the 1980s, there was way less inflammatory rhetoric. There was a lot of people that didn't like Reagan, but the level of I don't like Reagan was never like the level of I don't like Trump.
Right.
Or now, currently, Obama or Biden rather is senile. Like there's a disrespect of Biden that didn't exist back then. And as a young man trying to figure out what was going on in the world, seeing that there's this guy who's clearly lying about selling weapons to someone who hates us. There was a guy named Jimmy Tingle. He's a hilarious comedian out of Boston, and he had a great bit about this that he would do in a heavy Boston accent. He goes, "Mr. President, if you ever sell arms to people who hate us in the future, jot it down." He goes, "Put it on a Post-it note. Stick it on your refrigerator." Like, do you know who Jimmy Tingle is?
No, I didn't know who he was.
A great political comedian. It was him and Barry Crimmins and Jimmy Credico. There was a few of these guys that were like really politically aware comics. Barry Crimmins in particular, who was really the head of the like if there was a godfather of Boston comedy, it was Barry Crimmins, because he was the most intelligent, he was the most well-read, the most politically aware, and he would be involved in a lot of like political demonstrations and all these different things, and he was kind of the guy who kept the Boston comedians honest. He kept them from being hacks, and he was just a very, very politically aware guy.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Tingle was aligned with him. He was one of those guys as well, who initially started out as just a regular comic and then became much more of a political comic, and then ultimately became a guy. I don't think he does really comedy shows as much as he does like one-man shows now. But Tingle's bits about it made me think about it a lot, and then watching, you know, the Oliver North thing on television and the Contras and the Nicaraguas and all that stuff, and then eventually when I did the podcast later, getting to interview Rick Ross. The real Rick Ross, not the rapper.
Right.
The real Rick Ross, who the rapper named himself after, who is the guy who was selling coke in South Central, making millions and millions of dollars to fund
the Contras, right?
And he didn't know. He had no idea what was going on.
God.
He had no idea. He thought he was just like so slick that he could stay operated. He literally did not know that that they were allowing him to do this.
And so when you pulled that thread, like from that Reagan moment, was that like led to more skepticism of politicians, led for you to think that they're all liars or it's corrupt, or sort of like where did that thread lead?
Well, I think when you're a 20-year-old, 21-year-old person, your brain's not really fully formed. So you think a lot of like scrambled thoughts. And I think I was too busy with my own life to spend too much time thinking about politics, but I was super aware that it's not what I thought it was. which was like one of the themes of my life. Like as I got older, more aware, like, oh, everybody pretends that this makes sense. This doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, everybody pretends that there's a system in place. It's like really like it's well-meaning and it's really fair and it's going to benefit everybody. It took a while to slowly unpeel the onion, and that was probably one of the first things was seeing Reagan say that. Was Reagan
sort of like spoiled the illusion.
Well, it was just so obviously bullshit.
People always ask, they're like, what does Joe believe? And I'm like, look, I think it's like a skepticism of power. That's like the bedrock thing. And so Reagan was the genesis of that? Because if I were to throw a thread through all like your takes on politics, it's always something along the lines of, I'm not sure if I believe what that person is saying.
Yeah.
Like, is that where it comes from?
He was the first guy that I realized was the president, but also full of shit. I was like,
that's
wow.
a seminal moment, honestly.
Yeah.
For me, it was Iraq. Right.
Yeah, I remember watching, there was something on television about Nixon, about how, Watergate, and oh my God, he, bugged the opposition, and what a terrible person. But then, different people came along, and Gerald Ford was this bumbling guy, and then Jimmy Carter was like this really sweet guy, but couldn't really get the job done in terms of like getting the hostages released from Iran.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden Reagan comes along, and it's all, win one for the Gipper, and everybody's all rah America. And then, this was all when I was young. And as I was 20, 21, the whole Nicaragua Contra thing and the Sandinistas, and watching that on television going, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is the president? The president, he fucking remembers.
Yeah,
I remember thinking that. He fucking remembers. He's lying.
Right.
Maybe he didn't, honestly, because he was getting Alzheimer's, but most likely remembers.
No, he remembers.
He fucking knew. Is it uncomfortable for you how much unintentional power you have in the political sphere?
Yeah, it's weird. It's totally unintentional. That's why it's weird. It was there's no planning of any of this. It's just talking to people, and then all of a sudden, like, I still don't understand why it's so popular. I don't get it.
Really?
Like, I know a lot of other people do the same thing. I'm like, why is this fucking thing still number one?
Well, let's tease that out then, because you invented the long-form podcast game. There are a lot of people who followed you into the game. What do you think they're doing wrong relative to you? Like, what are you doing right? Like, what is the secret sauce of JRE?
I don't know.
So, well, then what do you see?
That's the thing. I don't think about it too much.
What do you see other people doing that's wrong? Because people ask me, they're like, well, you've been on Rogan. Like, he says he just shows up. And I'm like, yeah, he might say that, but it's very clear to me that you're an extremely, like, a very good practitioner of conversation, knowing when to interject, knowing when to stay silent, knowing when to move something forward, knowing when to bring something around, being like, oh, I'm familiar with this person, let me interject this at this time. It may seem artless, but it's definitely not. So, like, is that something that you learned? Is it a comedian skill? Because I listen to some comedy podcasts, and frankly, they're not as good. Some are decent. When I see you, I see somebody, endless curiosity. Is it innate in your personality? Is it a learned phenomenon?
It's both. I've always been curious, but I've learned how to be more effectively curious as I've gotten older. This podcast has been a massive education for me, an unintended, accidental education. The fact that I've been able to talk to so many interesting and intelligent people and get their perspectives and just sit across from them uninterrupted for hours at a time and get to see how their brain works, and then to consider my own brain. And then, in the beginning, there was a lot of bad podcasts. They didn't go that well. I wasn't that good at it. And I didn't think, first of all, I didn't think anybody was listening. I remember the moment I realized people were listening. I was at a sold-out show at the Chicago Theater, and I was on stage, and I was doing this bit, and it had something to do with the podcast. And I said, how many of you guys listen to the podcast? And the place went, yeah.
What year was this?
Maybe 2011.
Whoa.
So it's like 2 years in.
That's why, because I'm thinking in the
12
podcast,
maybe?
as a podcast historian or whatever, that was like the Mark Maron era, right? Like, that's when I remember Mark Maron was like a thing. And I was like, what is going on with Mark Maron? Like, Obama went on Mark Maron's podcast, which was like crazy. And I remember being like, man, there's something going on in this space. But then it's like you not only eclipsed Maron, like you became probably I would say one of the single most influential people in American life. And so, like, when do you think that transition happened for you? I know you haven't changed your your like affect or anything, but like when do you think that was? Like,
I'm
what?
not sure.
Yeah.
Does it get into your? You were saying like you don't think about why it's successful. Is that sort of intentional?
Yes.
Because I feel like part of why what's continues to be compelling is that you don't bring to it all of this weight of like, oh, a lot of people are listening. I got to be really careful, and I got to really watch which can be a beautiful thing and it can also get you in trouble at times. But is that sort of like lack of digging into what's made it successful and the type of impact it could have or does have, is that an intentional strategy to keep it kind of what it is?
It's not an intentional strategy. It's probably a survival technique. Because if I did stop and think, it's like if I read all my Twitter mentions, I'd probably go fucking crazy.
Yes,
right? If I just put out,
I have 1/10, and I had to stop reading them because I was going fucking crazy.
You can't do it. And if I paid attention to all of it, I wouldn't be able to do any of the things that I do, because then I wouldn't be able to think about those things, because I'd be thinking about my impact or my influence or what I did wrong or what I did right, or, oh, people like that, I should probably lean into that. I'd be thinking about all these different things instead of my commitment is to just do the best job that I can. Always do my best. And if it's something that requires some sort of, research, like if I have an important subject and I don't understand it too much, I'll read someone's book, or I'll watch documentaries, or I'll do something to get myself prepared for it. I love things like the UFO subjects because I don't have to do any preparation. I do a little bit but it's like I know
you got that subject kind of locked down.
I'm dialed into it, but I don't think it would help me if I thought about the impact of the show. And I also don't think that I could do it the way I do it, because I think normally if someone had reached the kind of amount of exposure that I have and you were really hyper aware of it, you'd start to protect what you've accumulated.
You have to, right?
But when you protect it, then it stops being what it is. And I think that's one of the things that freaks people out about me, is that I talk wild. I talk wild shit like a comic that has like 10,000 people listening, but it's 10 million.
Where where you have nothing to lose, but you actually have everything to lose.
But I kind of don't.
Right.
I kind of do, but I kind of don't.
Right.
Because it's like, I'm not a bad person. So like when I'm doing this, if I say something wrong, I can always apologize. If I'm incorrect about something, I can correct it. But my intention is always to be good. So I don't know how much I really have to lose, because I'm financially independent. So like that's a big one that holds people back, right? A big one that holds people back is financial influence. The influence of executives or the influence of advertisers. And I've lost advertisers because of shows. And it's like, good luck.
You don't care.
Sorry. Bye.
It doesn't hurt you.
I would have considered doing the podcast for no money. I've thought about that in the future. I'm like, maybe there'll come a time where I just no longer have any ads, because I'm like, maybe that would be the ultimate way. Because like, if someone wants to cancel you, one of the things that they do is they contact your ad. They mass email campaigns.
Right.
And it doesn't work, but it works with some.
Right.
But I have a backlog of people trying to be advertisers. So, like, generally, if one drops off, there's always
somebody in
bunch.
the queue.
It's funny. That's part of the reason that we went subscription first, is that we were like, you know what? When you're doing news, and especially in the beginning, they're like, we need to be able to rely on our people. But something you said, it was really interesting during our podcast. You said you talk to enough people, you can figure out whether they're telling the truth or not.
Yeah.
So how do you know when somebody's full of shit? Like, you've talked to thousands of people. Like, how do you know if somebody's full of shit or not whenever you're talking to them?
You don't really know, right? You kind of get a sense. Like, you get a sense of whether or not a person is being genuine. And sometimes you're doing jujitsu with them, right? You're like moving them in a certain direction, seeing how they respond. You're testing their ego.
Right.
You're challenging but maybe interrupt them on purpose. Maybe give them a little nudge. Like if you're concerned, they're like, you try to like see if they push back, like see where they're at.
Yeah.
You get a sense of a human, like if you get around so many people so often and you have so many conversations, you you recognize patterns, and I think the brain sort of picks up on them. But on at the end of the day, ultimately, you don't really know if someone's lying to you. Some people are just really good at lying.
Right.
Have you had a situation where you had someone on and after the fact you were like, upon reflection, maybe that person was full of shit?
Yes, definitely. Well, yeah, no question. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and some of them have been full of shit. Yeah.
When you say that that your goal is just to do a good job, how do you define that?
And the smoothest conversation I can, where people don't get uncomfortable listening. I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was a friend of mine's podcast, and he doesn't have the people wear headphones. And one of the things that I tell people, when you have 2 or more guests, you must have headphones, because then people recognize when they're talking over each other. Because
You're very right. Actually, it happened when we were talking.
yes,
That's right. Yeah.
because when you hear your voice at the same level you hear that person's voice, then it becomes painfully obvious when you guys are. And it's like,
Cross-talking.
right, we just did 3.5 hours, right? And it's this weird dance we're doing where, we all have something to say, and it's kind of exciting, right? 'Cause
Very exciting.
We're talking about all these like really intense subjects, and it's really stimulating, and you never know like when to jump in and we're like letting each other. We were all really good dance partners. It was really fun.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not. And my friends that I was listening to was not a good, and I'm calling them afterwards. I'm going to say, hey, bro, you got to get headphones.
So what makes you walk out of this room and go, man, that was a fucking great episode? And then what makes you walk out of here and be like, shit, I should have done something better? Like what is, you don't have to name people necessarily, but like,
But if
what are
you
the
wanted
types?
to name people,
by
that
the
would
way, if you want to
that would be
call people,
entertaining
please
as well.
do.
Yes, smoothness of absorption, right? Like whether or not it's easily absorbed into your mind. You're not uncomfortable. It doesn't feel gross. Like sometimes people say things, and even if they're honest, even if it's an honest, true thing, it'll sound braggy, or it'll sound hyperbolic. It'll sound maybe like disingenuously. You could fake humility, and people pick up on that too. They don't like that either. That's gross, right? Like,
Well, so this is funny though, because you're like, I don't think about it, but everything you're saying, you're the greatest audience advocate I've heard. So when people ask me about podcasting, I'm like, it's not about you. Like sometimes it is, but it's really not. And it's like
not.
you're always having to think about the people who are listening. So like, how do you do that? Like when you're talking about, when you see somebody do something, you're like, man, people at home are gonna hate this. Like, do you think about that type of stuff when you're talking to people?
sometimes I do. Like sometimes I'm in the middle of talking to somebody, and they're just blurting out nonsense. And I'm like, oh God,
What have I done?
This one sucks. And I've had a few of those. Like I had one, not recently, but within the last few months. And I walked out, I looked at Jamie, and I go, that wasn't a good one. Yeah, just because sometimes people, you take a chance. Like a lot of these authors and professors, I've never spoken a word to them,
Right.
nor have I heard them speak. Like
Right.
a lot
That's a
of
good point.
people, I've just read their stuff, and maybe I'll listen to an audiobook where an actor was reading it, and you don't know how good they're going to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised, and sometimes it's like, it's awkward.
Yeah. I mean, we have the same experience, but generally we're doing 10-minute segments.
Right,
So
yeah,
it's
you're
like
doing
less of
3
a risk.
hours.
You're not making an
Yeah.
hour plus commitment to this person. You mentioned actually with us that you are a very self-critical person. So
Yeah.
do you go back? Do you rewatch the
No.
episodes? You don't do any of that.
I don't need to.
Do you know in your head?
I know
And so
it
what are the
sucks.
what are the type of thoughts that'll go through your head, or what are the things that you're looking for, or thinking about, or that would stick with you? Like, I should have done that different.
Giving the people enough space is big. Like letting them talk. Like, there's always this urge to talk. When 2 people are talking, you get excited.
Right.
And these subjects they're stimulating, right? And you want to talk. So you got to give people you want to sort of, first of all, you want to make them welcome, and you want to kind of caress the conversation. You don't want to beat on it. You want to like kind of like let's figure out a way to make you the most comfortable. Let's figure out a way to get the most out of you. And then also, I think you have to have genuine curiosity, because I think we can all pick up on artificial curiosity.
Yes.
We can pick
Like,
up on.
oh, that's interesting. And you're like, you don't
Yeah,
fucking
yeah,
mean
yeah,
that.
like, ew.
You don't mean that.
Yeah, well,
you're like-
that's late night TV hosts. They're
Yeah.
the worst.
Right.
It's
Very
crazy.
true.
It's so clunky and fake, and it's air quotes professional. And the thing about podcasts is you're professionally unprofessional.
Yes.
Because you're really just having a conversation.
So,
and if you're doing it well, you're making these people feel like you're talking to someone who cares. You're talking to someone who cares about and you really, the only way to do that is to actually care. Like you really want to care about what this person is saying and thinking.
So it actually reminded me, because I've always, for the years I've listened to you, it's always been very clear, like an antithesis to the corporate suit, like the development deals, the comedy. So you're Joe Rogan. You've literally you were in LA for decades, Hollywood, sports, comedy. Basically 3 like titan areas of American entertainment. What do people not know about that industry that they should know, which also caused you clearly to be like, I've generally had a bad experience? And I'm obviously not with the UFC or anything like that, but like you having been at the center of all these worlds, you've seen a lot of shit, I guess, and it caused you to say, I cannot be controlled by these people. Like what were some of those experiences, and like why do you think that the industry is the way that it is today?
They don't have, I mean, here's the best way to describe what's going. This is the problem, not just with Hollywood, but also with Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is inexorably connected to show business. There is no getting around that. It's the reason why a large percentage of people move there, and it also massively affects the politics of the place, and not just politics, but social discussions, the way people communicate, because it's an incredibly disingenuous way of communicating, where you want to say the things that people are going to want to hear, because that way they're going to cast you. So here's the thing. You take these people, and generally speaking, people come to Hollywood if they have an acting dream. That's the big reason why, right? That's like probably the number one. There's comics, they come there and they're different, but not necessarily, because a lot of them get into acting and they get like corrupted by that system too. But the way this system works is you go there and then you go into a room like this one. So like maybe we could be the casting directors, and someone would come in and you go, hey, Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you move from? And there's like a smugness to it and a weirdness to it, because they have power over you. And they're like, well, I'm from New Jersey, but, I've been acting. I did a bunch of plays and blah, 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 and I'm out here trying it out. Okay, Mark. Well, you're going to read for the role of Ted. And then, like some fucking PA will read off a thing. Well, Ted, I don't even know if we can do this, man. It just seems like it's all wrong. You're like, come on, man. We can do it. And so you're in this. I've done this so many times. You're in this like completely
like a hotel
non-natural environment. It's usually a conference room in a production office. And you're in this non-natural environment with these smug people that have this massive amount of power over you. And it shapes the way people communicate. Like I've been in rooms where they'll discuss politics like right away, and you see people bend to whichever way the wind is blowing. Like, what do I have to say?
What do they want me to say?
I think it's about time we had a woman president. Like they'll say shit.
Like,
well, you see it. You see the They don't have opinions. These, when I say they, some of them do, but a lot of them don't. What they have is a conglomeration of opinions that they've adopted because they think it'll be beneficial for their career. Because their career is
gross.
They're insecure people that go to a place where they're going to get rejected a lot. It is the worst thing ever for their mental health. I stopped dating actresses like in the 90s. It was like 94. I was like, oh, this is not good. Like this doesn't work. Like these people are crazy. And I'm like, I know I'm crazy, but I'm a like comedian / martial artist crazy. It's like a different kind of crazy.
Okay.
It's like a more like honest crazy. Like their crazy was I need to get cast in things. And also, I got insanely lucky. I auditioned for 2 television shows, and the 2 television shows I auditioned for, I got both of them. It was nuts. Like I got the show called Hardball. That was the first thing I came out for. I got that. And then Hardball got canceled, and I auditioned for News Radio, and then I got that. So it was like 2 things in a row. It was unheard of. So just dumb luck. I auditioned for the right things, and then so I didn't see this side of it. Because I was already working.
The like constant rejection side.
So I would go on auditions for movies and stuff that I probably didn't really want and I
You
would
did
go,
it because you were supposed to, right?
You're supposed
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
My agent would literally tell me, you need to go out on these so these casting directors know who you are. So they know you and they like you. Even I go, but I can't even do this because I'm doing this. They're like, it's
go.
better to have them want you and not be able to get you.
That's weird.
So,
Makes
okay.
sense.
So, and then there was like maybe something that's going to be cast while you're on summer break. Okay, fine. So I would go on these auditions and I would see these poor fucks that were like lost in this world of being chosen for things. And that's what shapes the entire mindset of that part of the country. The entire mindset of that part of the country is doing things that you think other people will like. Imagine a
that's so
hellscape of a
corrosive.
world where everyone in the business, in one business, everyone is liberal.
Yeah.
How is that possible? How is that possible?
Right.
How is it possible when the country is basically divided 50-50? So you're telling me that everyone who is everyone who's creative? Is it everyone who is expressive? Is it everyone who's theatrical? Is that possible? It's not possible because it's not really opinions. They're willing to not have any opinions on anything else other than feeding narcissism, feeding this career that seems insurmountable and impossible to achieve. Because when you're thinking about someone wanting to be like an actor on a television show, you're like, what are the odds that you make it? It's so small.
Yeah.
Right.
Like there's so many people in Hollywood that never make it. Like I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day about his ex-girlfriend. And she was really mean to him in college, and she cheated on him with his friend, and all this. And she's still trying to make it now. She's 48.
Wow.
And he was talking about how like he ran into her, and there's this fucking weird moment. And I was like, dude. Because it's crazy. A lot of them just drop off. They just quit because they realize they're clinging to this ship and they can't quite pull themselves up. And then they're in the middle of the ocean like, I got to drop off the ship. And then sometimes they drop off and they're 60 years old.
There's nothing
and they've
else
never
left.
made it.
Wow.
And then maybe they got like a bit part on like a sitcom where they walk in with a pizza and they have one line, they leave, and that's on their reel forever. Like this is that industry. So that industry has made a bunch of fucking insane people because they were insane going in there. They needed a lot of attention already. And then on top of that, they get rejected over and over and over again. And I remember this girl that I was dating, she would come home from auditions and then she'd just be like, just devastated because the audition didn't go well and she stumbled through things. She's just like, you could like feel the angst like pulsating off of their bodies. Like people were just, and you run into that more than you don't. Because most people are bitter and most people are weirded out and they adopt these liberal sensibilities and ideologies, and they don't necessarily do it because they thought these things through. I mean, occasionally you got your Mark Ruffalo type characters really all in on a lot of things,
Right.
but most of them are not.
Right.
Most of them are just nonsense people, and those nonsense people will get on stage and they'll say, like at the Academy Awards or at the Grammys, they'll talk about, this is what we have to do. We have to make sure that we support this and that, and it's fucking horseshit.
Or like
And
that Imagine video where they all
oh
sang.
my God, it was perfect.
Oh, it was
Perfect.
So
I'm like, who
cringe.
asked for this? We
Perfect.
never fucking asked you for this.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect
And it's
encapsulation.
like, do you think you're actually helping anyone?
Yeah, I'm like,
right now?
no,
Like,
this is so
accomplishing
bad.
That was
nothing.
my first favorite one. My second favorite one was after the George Floyd thing, where they all did that black and white video. Like,
Oh,
I will
yeah,
no
right,
longer
right,
stand for it.
right.
I will no longer stand for any race. I'm like, wait, how much racism are you standing for? Like,
Right?
what are you,
What were you doing before?
Bro, you live in
standing
fucking Santa
for?
Monica. What are you? Everybody's super liberal out there. What are you experiencing?
So that's the people that like don't make it, right? That
Even the
you're
people
talking-
that do.
And then
we're
so do
talking
you
about
think,
two groups of people that do.
Right.
The Imagine people and the people in the other video
and
are people
so
that
do. Do you think that fame has its own like corrosiveness and like the people who actually make it, and then you're in a different situation where you're not faced with constant rejection. Now you're faced with constant adulation. Like, what does that do to people, and what has that experience been like for you?
I think you have to have something that tests your ego. And for me, it's always been martial arts and exercise and yoga. And, you know, we talked about sauna.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that tests you as much as you don't think it does. You need things that test you. If you just have this smooth sailing life where you get out of the shower, you put your arm out and someone hands you a towel and you're like, I'd like fresh fruit. And they bring you a plate of fresh fruit. And you're like, and then that's a lot of people, especially when you are on a movie set and you're a major star. I would imagine that is your reality where you're just constantly being catered to. And you start thinking that you're different and better than than other
You
people.
deserve
Yeah,
it.
right.
It's very unhealthy. And it's
Super
very
weird.
sketchy.
It's fucking weird.
It's
like
fucking
when I
weird.
think about it.
Yeah. It's
and
psychologically,
Right.
it's not where people are supposed to be. But you think about it, like, what do they behave like? Well, they behave like Joffrey in fucking Game of Thrones, right? Isn't that his name?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
you
same.
got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You behave like a king. You behave like a dictator. Because like all these people are like throwing roses at your feet and like the red carpet shit. Like I fucking never would do red carpet. Even movies that I did, like I did a couple of movies with Kevin James. Like we'd like you to walk the red carpet. Like fuck you. I'm like I want to go in the back of the theater. I'm not walking through that red carpet.
It's a very weird custom when you think
like
about
stand
it.
there, Joe, over here, and then some people are posing. They're picking out their outfit. I'm wearing a fucking hoodie
Picking
and
their
I'm putting it
angles.
on and sneaking in the back. I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that.
But the crazy thing, though, is that what you're describing, that old Hollywood, well, you and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like everything is changing. Now it's all like the TikTok kids, like Mr. Beast. I mean, we encounter like some of this. You created this whole space, right, of the YouTube, like
I didn't create this whole space.
Well, I think
How
you.
dare you.
I would say that you would.
It would have happened without me.
I would
bro.
call you the father of the space, whether you like it or not. And like, I think we are an outgrowth of that. I think actually a lot of new comedy that I see, for example, like YouTube comedy is how I primarily engage with comedy. Like, and then. I mean, Andrew Schultz, I became friends with him because of your show. Like, I reached out to him and then I started engaging with this podcast and more like, but Hollywood didn't have anything to do with that. So I feel like everything has changed. The Logan Paul thing was kind of crazy to me because I'm like, you have this guy who was a YouTuber and then became a boxer. And now he's just did this thing with Floyd Mayweather where they just sold, what was it, like 1 million pay-per-views. I'm like, that's fucking crazy.
It's crazy.
And so now you have YouTubers who want to be boxers and boxers who want to be YouTubers. And because of you, I've engaged slightly in UFC. All these UFC guys are becoming influencers. Like I can see them online and they've got like fucking hot sauces and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like this weird change that happened. So like, what do you make of, as everything goes independent, everything moves online, has it gotten worse? Has it gotten better? Like, what are some of the downsides, plus sides, or whatever, as things have changed in the last, it's only been like 10 years, and things are totally different.
Yeah, I don't think it's a worse or better. It's just a new world we're living in. Like, is the world worse or better because of social media, or worse or better because of smartphones? Well, it's better because maybe you can have an app that tells you if you're having a heart attack. You know, it's better because you can Google the answer to a question and you don't have to bullshit people anymore. You don't have to wonder. You don't have to go find an encyclopedia. It's better because we have more access to information. You can take videos of your kids and you can look at them forever.
Right.
I mean, I have videos of my daughter when she was a little baby and I pull them up on my phone all the time. They're my favorites. You know, she's 13 now, but I could see her when she was 1. You know, and
that's awesome.
There's something amazing about this technology. There's something amazing about all of it, but it's very challenging. You know, we're putting ourselves in an unusual position of stress where, you know, like when you see people that get in these social media squabbles, you know, you talked about Jamie Kilstein.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie Kilstein has a crazy story about, you know, he was like all in as a social justice warrior.
Yeah.
And he would tell me that he would attack people on Twitter and then he'd be walking down the street and he couldn't help like looking at his phone and checking the mentions and then, but he, you know, he's really honest about that. It was kind of brave.
Yeah.
He realized like he got canceled for like the most, it was like literally the most benign thing. Like
Right.
he was like trying to date someone.
Right.
And they were like, "You're a predator." And he's like, "What?
Yeah.
What does that mean?"
And he's like, but I've been doing this, so now what do I do?
Like, what do you say?
Poor
Like,
guy.
what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a man who's attempting to date a girl,
Yeah.
like in a lot of those circles is like problematic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not even real. What it is like, it's like we were talking about with Elon or with money earlier. It's attack vectors.
Yeah.
It's finding a thing to attack you on. And when people can't, when there's nothing to attack, they attack things and then they justify that that's something that they should attack.
Right.
When you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And one of the things about social media is that people generally look to complain about things, whether it's to complain about people or it's to complain about the state of politics or the climate or whatever the fuck it is. Like you get the most juice out of complaining about things. And the algorithms recognize that obviously as well, which is why the algorithms recognize that the things that people interact with most are the things that they hate. So those are the things that people go after. And they say that it's like, oh, well, they're engineering it to make us, you know, hateful and angry. But my friend Ari did an experiment and he went on YouTube and he only looked up puppies for like months. And all YouTube suggested was puppies. They didn't
Right.
suggest
So they're just
like,
serving you what you
They
want.
didn't
they didn't
suggest
suggest
like
right.
murdering
KKK
puppies or
videos
something.
or-
Yeah. Like,
No,
well, if
it's
you
just-
like puppies, you're gonna love killing
Yeah.
puppies.
Look, if you look at my YouTube is like there's some political discussion, but it's a lot of like martial arts matches and professional pool and like mindless stuff like muscle cars and things along those lines. But it's like your social media algorithm, whether it's I don't use Facebook very much, but whatever you're looking at most is what they're going to recommend to you most.
Right.
So it's more of a reflection of the problem with human psychology, is that we do tend to concentrate on negative things, which I think is overall very unhealthy for us because we're hardwired to deal with real problems because we evolved trying to get away from predators and enemy tribes are coming over the hill and trying to steal our resources, and now everything's pretty fucking easy in that regard. So now we're looking for problems in our culture. We're looking for problems in the way people communicate, and we're looking. In many cases, we're looking to enact power over other people to avoid looking inward at our own problems and difficulties.
Right.
If you look at online, the people that are the most disciplined, that accomplish the most things and have the most impact, spend the least amount of time complaining about other people.
Yeah.
The people that spend the most amount of time complaining about other people and the most of the time calling out people and insulting people and shaming people, they always get it back at them. Someone always comes at them because they're filled with flaws. And they're the type of person that does that all the time is the type of person that's kind of shitty.
Right,
and then other people are going to say, well, you've fucked over your employee, or you fucked over your mom, or you did this to that person. And look, here's the thing we found you wrote 4 years ago on Twitter, you piece of shit, you're an ableist, or you're a this or a that. And it's like, you're involved in this constant cycle of negativity. And like, it's not healthy for anybody. And the more time you can concentrate on yourself and people you care about and friendships and love and community and your actual interests, real interests. Like you should have real interests. You should have hobbies. You have things you're curious about. You should have like subjects you're fascinated with that you really like. If there's a good documentary on UFOs, on YouTube or on iTunes or something, I get fucking pumped. I'm excited. Like, I'm not thinking about complaining about people. I'm not
Right.
thinking about calling people out. I'm like, ooh, what's this? We got some new footage? What do they got? Is this real?
Yeah.
I'm excited. Like, I like positive things. And I think if I can express anything that will help people, the more you take care of your own bullshit, the less you're going to worry about other people's bullshit. And the more you can enjoy things that you're actually interested in.
Right.
As opposed to spending time cultivating negativity, which is so intoxicating. It's so easy for people to get caught up in this artificial drama.
I wonder if you think that this is right too. I think there's also like a very innate human longing to be like a hero in a way, to do noble things and get credit for that and be recognized. And I think part of the instinct also comes from that in a society that doesn't give us a lot of opportunities to like exercise that particular muscle. It's a longing for like, okay, I can show that I'm virtuous. I called out this person and now other people are joining, and it makes you feel like you actually accomplished something.
For sure. Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, that's what virtual signaling is all about, right? And there's a bunch of human reward systems that are just built into what it means to be a person, that they can get hijacked by technology and culture and a lot. And you really think you're doing a good thing. You think you're changing things, but really you're just making noise,
So something I think is kind of crazy is that this podcast gets millions of viewers, of listeners, etc. So JRE. And yet we live in DC, and we've seen this with the success of our own show. Even though our show consistently will beat a CNN primetime hour, people in power don't seem to care. And I've considered this with your work as well, because I will hear a newsworthy interview that you'll do with like Bernie Sanders or something like that, or a newsworthy interview with Tulsi or with Andrew Yang, or even any general influencer, and it will not get the same level of mainstream attention as if, let's say, they sat down with the New York Times. But you have 10 times the audience of these people. Why do you think that is? I've never been able to put my arm around it. Do you think people in power don't understand you? Actually, wait, because here's the thing. They do. By the way, you have no many people. No idea how many people are like, "Can you give me Joe Rogan's number? My congressman really wants." I'd be like, literally no. Like he doesn't give a shit about you, and I'm not gonna do that. Like, can you pass on this person to this? And I'm like, dude, he would hate you. Like, absolutely not. And in general, like, I'm respectful of your time. So there is this dual thing where people are aware there are a lot of people here who are listening, but they're not yet ready to like engage with it on a mainstream level. Why do you, like, what's going on there in terms of, I almost want to call it a lack of respect, because it's like they want to pretend that you don't exist, but they also have to reckon with it at some point.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's one more thing I don't think about.
I guess that's just me.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, Prince fucking Fauci, right? Like, why is Fauci commenting on Joe Rogan? What? Prince Harry openly attacked you for no reason. I actually went to go listen to the episode, and I was like, what does this fucking guy have to say about Joe? He opened his interview with Dax Shepard attacking you. That was the first thing. He's like, did you guys see what happened with Joe Rogan? He goes, terrible with responsibility, platform. And I was like, what is going on here? Right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Good luck to that guy.
Right. I heard you say something once that made me really sad, and it was that you can't save humanity at scale. I can't remember who you were talking to, but you were talking about, I think it was about diet, I think it was about ending factory farming and more. Do you actually think you can't save humanity at scale? Like, or are you talking in terms of your own influence that you have, in terms of that message around health?
There's no one human being where everyone's going to listen. Mm-hmm. There's no one positive message. Hey, we should just love each other. Hey, we should value community and friendship, and we should take care of our bodies and be healthy. Hey, fuck you. I'll do whatever I want. There's no one person that can say anything where everyone's going to listen.
Yeah.
But that is the most significant factor. Mm-hmm. The most significant factor is doing things that are positive both for your health and for your friendships and for your community, and also like choosing a path in life that is actually rewarding and satisfying. And that's hard. It's hard for a lot of us. Yeah. We talked about it on our podcast today.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a very difficult thing to do, and this idea that everybody starts at the same starting block is fucking total horseshit. And that is something that people who are doing well like to stick in the face of people that really were dealt a really bad hand of cards.
So the three of us, we can't just snap our fingers, but a lot of people are going to listen to this. If you're one of those people who have heard you talk about, I used to work one of these jobs, just like working in these soulless cubicle jobs, I had the financial ability to be like, I have to get the fuck out of here. Like, I have to get out. But there are a lot of people who I left behind who are still there, like, who are still working in that cubicle.
Let's talk about you guys, right? Mm-hmm. You guys were in a situation where you were doing a show for someone else, and there was a significant amount of fear in leaving. But you had so many things on your side. Mm-hmm. You had other people like myself and Kyle and all these other people that loved you and supported you that would be more than willing to help promote you, people with a lot of influence. You also had a tremendous amount of followers, both on your social media and on your show itself. Mm-hmm. You had so many things going. You have talent. You have the right morals and ethics. You have a great insight to politics and to the social issues. And yet you were still worried.
Yeah.
You're still scared.
Right.
We were terrified.
Yeah, we were petrified.
Now imagine if you're making $15 an hour and you have children to feed.
I don't know what
and
you
have a dream. You have a risk.
Yeah.
You have a thing to do, and you're scared. And a lot of people would advise you to not take any risks in that situation, and that might be good advice because everybody's got a unique situation. Everybody's situation is totally, completely unique, and it's hard always. But my advice is always, you have to think of your life in terms of, first of all, it's a temporary situation. You have a finite amount of time, and it can be a good time or it can suck. Mm-hmm. And if it sucks, you have to fight to change it as if your life depends on it, because it really does. It really does. The quality of your life depends on it. The quality of the experience depends on it. And you've got yourself into a bad situation. Like if you went down the wrong road, okay, if you have a destination to go to and you're supposed to go left, but you fuck up and you go right. And you go right for like a couple of miles and you realize like, oh my God, I went right. What do? Do you keep going right?
No.
Do you stop, get out of the car and cry? No, you realize like, oh my God, it's going to take me hours and hours and hours to go back and turn around and turn back. Yeah, that's what you got to do. You got to get better the same way you got sick. You've been living your life, and if you've been living your life with a bad diet or with a bad mindset, or you've been living like blaming other people for your failures, you've got to recognize that those things are not serving you well, and you have to back up and you have to go left. You have to go the right way. You have to figure out a way to get on the right path. And for a lot of people, that kind of change and that kind of alteration of these comfort patterns that people fall into is extremely difficult to do. But you've got to do it. You've got to do it. It's the only way to do it. And this is, it's easier to say, it's easy for me to say because I'm an impulsive person who's reckless, and I've always just gone whatever way I want to. And people have always given me advice. Don't do that. I'm like, fuck you. And I've always done that. Always, from the time I was a child. It's because I was a lock-key kid, and my parents didn't really pay attention to me. And my first success in life was doing something extremely dangerous. It was doing martial arts competitions when I was a young teenager. So for me, I was like, I'm not listening to anybody now, because this is the number one thing in my life ever, and it's the thing that everybody told me to never do. And then I became really good at it, and it became my identity. But then I realized, okay, I can't do this anymore because this is bad for my brain. I'm getting brain damage, and there's no future in this. I got to get out. And then I started doing stand-up comedy. I'm like, I'm going to be a comedian. And the same thing. Everybody was telling me, don't do that.
Was that a scary transition, or you just did it?
No, it was definitely scary.
What was that? What was that like?
Well, it's just you don't know whether or not it's going to work. Anytime you're going down, you're taking the first couple steps on a path with no certainty whatsoever. It's terrifying. You don't know. But again, I was 21 years old. I was reckless, and I had been accustomed to doing dangerous things. So it was exciting. So I was like, well, let me just try this. And again, there was no future in it. I did not know whether or not it was going to work. And the odds were, when I looked at all the people around me that were falling off that didn't make it, the odds were not good, but I just did it. So then I started doing everything like that, and it kind of set a pattern in my life where I follow my instincts. Does it seem like a thing to do? Like when I first started doing the podcast, like my friend Ari, famously, I always mock him. He goes, you got to edit it. You got to edit it. It's too long. I go, why? He goes, no one's going to listen to 3 hours. I go, then don't listen.
And then cut it off when you're ready.
Do you want people to listen to your show? Trust me. Edit it. I go, I'm not editing shit. Fuck off.
Well, that's the signature, though, is the 3 hour mark. And actually it changed, in my opinion, it changed everything about what people were willing to listen to. I think the success of our long form show and more, a lot of it was born from that space. And that's why I think about it a lot. Was it intentional? Were you just like the original ones with Red Band, like the episode 1 and 2 and more? Like, when did the 3 hour become part of the signature necessarily? Like, why did you go 3 hours in the first place?
After 3 hours, people have to pee.
Got it. Yeah. But then why are movies only an hour and a half, right?
Some Tarantino movies go longer.
That's true.
I think, honestly,
that's true, actually.
I just feel like you gotta, to get an idea and really have a conversation with someone and get into their head and find out what makes them tick, it takes time to cook. You can't just microwave that shit. You have to, if you have an important, complex idea and you go on CNN for 5 minutes and talk to Chris Cuomo about it, you're fucked.
Yeah,
it's not getting out right. It's not. It's like ideas are like human beings. They're like personalities and the history of your life. It's complex. There's a lot going on. If you're talking about something, whatever it is, whether it's the ancient history or cosmology, or these are complex subjects. Any things that are really interesting, they require long examinations of things, and even then you're just scratching the surface. Really, you're supposed to go to school for 8 years. It's there's a lot of benefit in long conversations. And if I'm naturally anything, I'm naturally curious. I've always been a very curious person, and that goes back to I moved around a lot when I was a child. My parents, we moved from New Jersey to San Francisco when I was 7, and then we lived in San Francisco till I was 11, and then we moved to Florida when I was 11, and we lived there for 3 years, and then we moved to Boston, and then we lived in Florida for 2 years till I was 13, and then we moved to Boston, and I lived there, and that's where I started doing stand-up. So I never had a chance to settle down in a place long enough to adopt everybody else's opinions. I had to form my own opinions on things, and I spent a lot of time by myself. And so spending a lot of time by myself, I found things that I was interested in, things that I was genuinely curious about, and I pursued those things. And that's what gave me joy, and that's what fulfilled my interests. And so that sort of just spilled out into podcasts. Like, if you ask me, like, what is the difference between what other people are doing and what I'm doing? Maybe they're trying to do something that they think is going to be the thing that works. And I just did, what I wanted to do. And I got lucky that it works.
Yes.
Maybe a lot of people that just do what they want to do, other people wouldn't be interested in it.
Do you think if it hadn't taken off, you'd still be doing it? Like, if it was still like 500 people listening, tuning in, do you think you would still do it?
I don't know. It's a good question. Honestly, it's a good question. I mean, in the beginning, my wife was always like, you don't have to do it. Like, I have to do it. I don't have to do it. I made a commitment.
What was the impulse? Why? Like, I think, forget, it was already in that episode you did with the guy who inspired you. I forget his name, where he...
Anthony Cumia? From Opie and
right,
Anthony.
That's right.
Yeah.
Opie and Anthony, that's what it was, is that you were inspired by going on a show. What was it about that free-flowingness, that something inside you was like, I gotta fucking do that? You're like, I have got to do
I always
that.
loved to go on those shows.
Yeah.
I always loved to go on Opie and Anthony and Howard Stern and those kind of radio shows. Like, when I would say, if I was going to fly into Phoenix and do stand-up for the weekend, I would do the local morning show. And I loved doing it because you would just talk. They'd go, hey, Joe Rogan's here, blah, blah, blah. How's it going? And I'd be like, oh, it's great. And like, what have you been up to? And I go, dude, I've been reading this book about Zechariah Sitchin. And I would have all this stuff to talk about, this wild stuff. And sometimes people would say, hey, you should have a radio show. And I even got offered a radio show at one point in time. And I was like, oh, I don't know about this. I'm like, I'm just going to get fired, and then I can't swear.
Right.
Like, it's going to limit.
FCC and all
Yeah.
shit. Right.
And they find the shit out of you. It's real. Like, if someone says something wrong, like, you can get a $250,000 fine or something crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, like Howard Stern, that's one thing that people don't give enough credit for. They fined the fuck out of that guy. And
he just didn't care.
He kept going. He just kept going. But it's also like the company paid the fines because it was valuable to have him on. It was also kind of a badge of honor that this guy is getting fined by the government. And this is during the Bush days, right? During the Bush administration. They went after him because of his influence. It seemed like a thing to do. And then when Ustream came around, where you could just have a webcam and just talk into a webcam and just fuck around, I thought it'd be fun to do. It was just a fun thing. And then it became a thing like, all right, we're going to do this every Monday. I'll see you Monday. Bye. And we would like log off and laugh and go, that was fun. But it wasn't a thing where it was ever thought about like, this is going to be a career.
Yeah.
So because of that, I just approached it. I just did it the way I wanted to do it. That's why, like, when Ari was giving me advice, I wasn't listening at all. Like,
right, because you're like, I don't care.
Like,
I'm just
who
going to do
cares?
it.
But
right.
if Ari was the Ari of
to be.
today, which ironically he does 3-hour podcasts, but sometimes more. But if Ari was the Ari of today and I was the me of then, I maybe would listen because he's got a successful podcast. I'd be like, oh, I should edit it. Because no one had successful podcasts back then. I mean, Marin had a podcast and Carolla had a podcast.
Right.
Maybe Carolla was number one because I think Carolla was coming off of radio, and it was interesting to people that this guy who was the guy who took over in Los Angeles for Howard Stern, when Howard Stern went to satellite, all of a sudden started a podcast. And I went to do his show before I ever did a podcast. And I remember I'm like, wow, you do like a real show. Like, you got microphones and cameras and shit. And he had a bunch of employees. Like, oh, this is wild. And then I started thinking like, man, maybe I should do that. But like, when we started out, it was just a laptop. But it's been a completely organic rate of progression, all of it. No think about it. One of the things I've never done, I've never advertised it. I never paid for advertisement. It's all word of mouth, 100%. I never did anything to promote it. I never went on anybody else's podcast and said, you got to watch my podcast. and I never did like a calculated press tour. Nothing. Just kept doing it.
I wonder if that's part of why people responded to it so much, though, because everybody's so used to being pitched all the time in every aspect of their lives that I actually think that's one of the things that appeals.
Probably. And I think people can tell if you're genuinely interested in what you're doing. and I think that comes out.
It does.
Yeah. If you're genuinely interested, I think
Yeah.
it's interesting to
People can sniff out bullshit and fakeness better than, like, human beings aren't that great at statistics or math or numbers or like any of that stuff. But I do think that there's a very good instinct in general for that sort of like genuineness and authenticity, and like I can tell this person really means what they say.
It's particularly obvious in contrast. So if you took someone who's doing a late night talk show style, and you had them try to do that on a podcast,
disaster.
It would
Some
be
canned
a
story about-
plane crash. But what it's like is like the difference between Howard Stern and morning DJs. Hey, coming up right now, we've got blah, 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 Bob Seger. Rah. And they play. That's what those people had.
Yeah.
And then Stern came along, and he was himself, and people were like, "This is crazy," and that was in contrast. He made all those other people look foolish because they weren't themselves. So we talked about on the podcast before that guy, that's the seed of all podcasts.
Yes.
It's that guy. It's Howard Stern.
What's funny to me, though, is that in a way, Stern is responsible for Trump. Like, Trump, was on Stern all the time, kind of being himself. And so when then I think about you and I try to think about your audience and like maybe the next president is born here. I have no idea.
I didn't have Trump on twice.
Yeah, I know.
Two opportunities. I was like,
So let's talk about that, because
like, nope.
This is, a message out to all the politicians who keep asking me in order to connect me with Joe Rogan. What is Joe Rogan's process and how he decides which politician? Because look, like, what do Crenshaw, Yang, Tulsi, and Bernie have in common? Not a lot. Okay, but then how do you define that? How do you look at somebody and say you're not full of shit before you even get to meet them and say, yeah, I'll sit down?
I heard Andrew Yang talk, and I saw the things he was saying. I didn't think he was a politician. I thought he was a businessman who had a unique idea. And Andrew's unique idea was that, first of all, I think he has good foresight to see that automation's coming, and it's going to take a lot of jobs. And I think he's correct about that. And whether it's 10 years from now or 20 years from now, it's something that needs to be addressed now before it gets out of hand. Yeah. And also, as we talked about on our podcast earlier, I think that there's a real benefit to something like universal basic income, in that it'll allow people to take care of their basic needs, and maybe those people can take chances and pursue a dream that would be outside of their reach. So that was Andrew. With Tulsi, she just seems so genuine in so many different ways, and so respectable, right? A person who was a congresswoman who served 2 tours of duty overseas in a medical union, and dealt with people getting blown up and shot, and she'd seen it all, and has so much integrity. She was my number one choice. Yeah, I just felt like I felt like Bernie was more popular and had a chance at doing something different and changing things. And so I wanted to talk to him. Those are the type of people that I like to talk to. Crenshaw is a Navy SEAL. I have a deep respect for people that can do that. I have a deep respect for people that have served. The guy lost an eye. Yeah. And even if I disagree with him on certain political opinions and positions, I have a massive amount of respect for the guy as a human being and who he is. And I've hung out with him in real life. That's who he is all the time.
No, absolutely.
So what happened with the Trump? What's the backstory there? And did you consider having him on? Did you weigh it? Did you think about it?
Not really. They kept coming back they wanted me to do it at the White House, and I was like,
whoa!
I can't imagine.
Can you imagine that? Oh my God!
The Joe Rogan.
Did you tell him
behind the Oval Office?
If he had been willing to come here, I don't know if you were in LA at that point. I
was in LA.
Would you have considered it more if he came?
Maybe I would have thought about it in LA, to do a real 3-hour thing. But either way, the problem is, it's a real problem in that I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable, and I don't think it's my role. If I'm talking to someone like him, there's some uncomfortable things that have to be addressed.
I've interviewed Trump. I know exactly what you're talking about. And he actually hates to be pushed. So you'll have to be like, Mr. President. And he's like, he gets pissed whenever you'll do it.
But that's why you got to do 3 hours, too.
Right. That's true.
You got to cook them.
Right. But his staff will make sure that they, right?
Exactly.
I remember.
Not only that, they'd want to edit it.
Oh, of course. 15 minutes in, underneath the Resolute desk, his staff person is hitting me in the leg trying to get me to rap it. And I was like, dude, I'm not fucking rapping this thing. I was like, I'm rapping whenever Trump is going to rap it.
Staff members hitting your leg?
Bill Shine, the former head of Fox News, was sitting there smacking my leg trying to get me to rap at 15 minutes.
Why?
15
Because you were
minutes.
asking uncomfortable questions?
Asking hard questions, right? Yeah. Wow. So I was like, that was, and in general, they just want you to come in, you get a bite or whatever, and then get
he
you
says
out of there.
Whatever they want him to say that day, and then they
Right,
want
and
it
then
to be
they're like,
done
"Get the
because
fuck outta
especially
here."
with
Yeah,
him,
right.
God knows what he's going to say.
The whole thing was not. It was not what I'm interested in. It's not what I do. Like the idea of going to the White House and doing a 20-minute podcast. It's not a podcast. I mean, I know Portnoy did it that way. He went there, but
yep.
For
he took
him,
a lot of shit for that too.
I'm sure he did, but it's like I'm not interested in that.
So
I don't care. I just don't ever do things saying this is going to be a big episode. It's going to be a lot of numbers. I do things if I think someone's cool. I'm interested in someone, or I think what their position is fascinating. With him, it's like I don't want to help anybody in this race. I certainly don't want to help him, and I certainly don't want to help Biden. And
did the Biden people approach you?
No, I think maybe early on. I don't remember. Before I got real controversial.
Before you were tweeted out from the presidential account, I remember being like, "That's crazy, man."
Before
like,
what?
When Trump tweeted out a clip of you, I was like, "That's
nuts. Well, that was because I said that I think of Joe Biden as having a flashlight with a dying battery, going for a long walk in the woods." And it turns out I'm right, because that motherfucker's flickering now.
We just did a whole thing on that. I mean, what's your advice then to the people who want to appeal to your demographic? This is what everybody's like.
What does that mean?
So that's the thing, which is that you have influence over people who are right and left. I think probably predominantly male, but people all over the spectrum, all over the income. There are Uber drivers and there are multimillionaires who listen to your show, because we were reached out to by some of them after we went on your show. And I was like, this is fucking crazy in terms of the amount of people that listen to Rogan. And the game in politics right now is everybody has the hard right lockdown and everybody has the hard left lockdown in terms of the base. But millions of people just fucking hate politics. And you seem to have tapped into something there. So if you're a politician and you're listening to this, and I can guarantee you some of them will, what's your advice to them in order to try and appeal to the people who are fans of Joe Rogan?
It's not my wheelhouse. I would send them to you guys. Like, I don't know enough about the way politics works. Like when we did the End of the World podcast with Kyle, like to have him on during the election, it's like, this is perfect because he expertly explained how it was going to go down and predicted incredibly accurately. He said you're going to get these early people that are voting for Trump because those are the people that are walking in and voting in person. The late ballots are all going to be the mail-in ballots, and those are going to be the one for Biden. So there's going to be a lot of places where people think Trump is winning, and it's eventually going to shift over to Biden. It's exactly what happened. Like, that was super valuable. So when it comes to someone who wants to do anything politically, I would refer to that. And if I did have a politician on that I thought was some sort of polarizing politician, I might bring on someone like you or Kyle or Jimmy Dore or someone who understands politics deeply. I do not. I'm too busy with other stuff.
Right, but you also are. That's the crazy thing. To me, I think all culture has become politics. So, like, you have become political in a way. I know you don't want to be, but, like, that's how people see you. Has that been frustrating for you? Like, as the podcast has progressed and gotten bigger?
The only frustrating thing is the misinterpretation of my positions.
Yes.
And maybe not. It's more of a misrepresentation than a misinterpretation. Like I think they've just decided that I'm a right-wing alt-right character because I had Milo Yiannopoulos on 4 years ago. There's things about that, which ironically led to Milo getting canceled.
That's right. It was you. It was your show. I remember that.
Pressing him about young boys and older gay men, and he was like saying that his position on it was that it was okay, and that it was for him when he was young that he was the predator. This is what he said, that he was going after the older men. And a lot of people that was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
But let's be honest, they were looking for something like that, right?
Of course. People have been hunting him for years, right, before that happened.
Yeah, and, it's really weird, right? Because, like...
Did you think he was phony when you were interviewing him?
Phony?
Yeah.
He's not phony. He's certainly doing a character, and he's certainly polarizing, and...
He's an attention seeker, for sure. Like, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. He's a showman in a lot of ways, in a weird way. And the thing is, he found this niche. And see, this is where it gets into censorship issues, because it's really curious. Because there was a point in time where aggressive, conservative, not conservative, right? Right-wingers, alt-right, whatever you want to call them, aggressive people who opposed a lot of liberal ideology were dominating a lot of social media platforms.
Yeah.
And before social media came in and checked it and started deleting accounts and banning people for using Pepe the Frog and all that kind of shit, they were dominating.
It was Wild West. I remember
it. Was Wild West.
13, 14, 2013, 2014 internet was fucking crazy.
In the marketplace of ideas, are we supposed to let that happen? Are we supposed to let these people just battle it out? Or are we supposed to take away people that we don't agree with?
Right.
And that's where it gets weird.
Right.
Because there's a lot of like aggressively shitty left-wing people now. Because there's a lot of people that are behaving the exact same way or worse than Milo did, but they're doing it against right-wing people, and we find that okay.
Yeah.
We find that acceptable. But we found what Milo did to be completely unacceptable, because the people that are in charge of tech platforms are predominantly, like overwhelmingly liberal, which is really interesting.
Well, are they liberal or are they Hollywood liberal?
I think a lot of
I think it's Hollywood liberal.
I think a lot of them are woke. Let's call it
ask
woke.
them about like pro-union or
Right.
like Medicare for all, and they're gonna be like, no, none of that.
But they're socially very liberal, right?
Yes.
The social liberal aspect of it, in terms of what's tolerable and not tolerable. Like when Megan Murphy got kicked off of Twitter for life for saying that she's a feminist, and she got kicked off for saying that men who transitioned to women were dominating some feminist spaces.
Right. Yeah.
And she got in some sort of beef with somebody, and she said, but a man is never a woman. And they just like,
I remember,
done.
I think Tim Pool pressed
Jack Dorsey.
yeah,
about
that's
that.
right on
Yes.
that. That was actually a very important
Yes.
moment. And like, I want to be very respectful of your time, and we're nearing the end of what we have you. And I think the major question that a lot of people see, I guess going forward, is like 10 years ago, you didn't see any of this happening. But now you're dominating sports, you're dominating, or look, you're top UFC commentator, right? You are the king of podcasting. You sell out stadiums as a comedian. Is there anything next? 10 years from now, are you going to be doing all three? Like, how do you see your career progressing? Or not even career, your life progressing?
I don't know.
Very unsatisfying answer, Joe.
But I think that's the, people think you have to have a fucking vision board.
Yeah.
And no, you just have to grind.
Yeah.
I'm a grinder. That's what I do. I get up every morning at 7 o'clock, and I do the same shit every day, whether it's working out or every night I get in the sauna. Like I do stand up every fucking chance I can. I grind, and I find that when I'm grinding, good things happen, and then I just decide to either keep doing something or not keep doing something. There may come a time where I decide, when it comes to like UFC, for instance, that maybe I'll just better off being a fan. Because one of the things that I loved more than anything was when I lived in LA, we used to do fight companions.
I remember, yeah.
So we would
right.
get together and smoke pot and drink and watch the fights and just talk crazy shit. And it was so much more fun. But I also have a deep amount of respect for the athletes, and I recognize that like being there and giving words to their performances and to honor them and to make it exciting and to just give some verbal horsepower to the experience for people that are watching at home. I feel extremely honored. I also can't believe any of this is real. Like I can't believe that I'm doing these three things simultaneously. It doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
Like Eric Weinstein said that he had this funny conversation with somebody where he was talking about the UFC, and then he was talking about a podcast, and then they went, wait a minute, that's the same guy? and then I'm like, dude, I think like that all the time.
That's funny.
I feel like that when I show up at the UFC and I walk into the arena and I'm like, what am I doing? Is this what I do? But then I put the headphones on, and then I'm breaking down techniques and going over movements and different things. It's like maybe if I was struggling, maybe if it was at the beginning of my career, I would have like an idea, like this is where I want to be in 10 years. but that's never what I've done. I've always just kind of like just kept going. And now what I'm doing is like people say, "Oh, what's your goal?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like my goal, I like doing this.
Yeah.
So as long as I like doing this, I'll keep doing this. That's kind of what my goal is. I want to get better at it. All the things, whether it's better at stand-up, better at podcasting, better at commentary. I want to get better at it. I want to make less mistakes. I want to make it more enjoyable for people that like it. I want to get better at it. And, you know, moments where I misspeak or I have a fuck up or, you know, people get mad at me. Like, I don't like those moments. That's not what I want. What I want is for people to enjoy it. You know, I don't want to give fuel to people that are just looking to get mad at me for something. I'm just trying to put together something that people enjoy. That's my 100% of my goal. There's no real agenda otherwise. I don't want any more attention. One of the things I was hoping about Spotify, I was like, one thing will happen is I'll be less famous. I'm like, it'd be nice.
How's
I think you
how's that
got
working?
way more famous.
How's that working
I'm
out
like
for you, Joe?
90% sure you got way more
I
famous.
didn't think it was good. I thought it was going to work the other way.
Well, I know we don't have you that long. Why do you think you got more famous because of Spotify? I feel like you became a household name after Spotify.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think as people realize there's a lot of money in this shit.
Really?
Yeah.
You think
you're
that's
probably
it?
right about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a big factor where people, it was
It
like,
was eye-opening.
it was like one of those moments in a movie where the record skips.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and they're like,
like, wait a second.
Wait a
Yeah,
second.
because
Yeah.
it was in Forbes and all this shit.
That's
And it was
true,
just
right?
like, whoa. And then the level of like weirdness in public ramped up considerably.
That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
considerably.
And
Yeah.
does that bother you or what
Most
does
people
that
are
explain?
nice.
Yeah, people
No,
are
I'm
mostly
going to say
nice.
all people are nice. Like no one's ever mean to me in public.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost always nice. Like there's been a couple
Sometimes
times.
too nice, I bet.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
people get weird, but you know, I work hard at being nice. I'm a genuinely nice person. I try to be nice all the time. So it's like most of the time it's just saying hi to people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's weird.
Yeah.
You have no anonymity. There's none. That's
I
all
can't
gone.
imagine
There used to be like some anonymity.
Yeah.
But now it's like oh, it died. It's all dead.
Those days are gone.
You know, but I mean, I think you can get that back. You just got to vanish for a while. You know,
Do
I
you
think
plan
Maybe
some
on,
people
that'll maybe
do
that'll
it.
be the
Do you
next
plan?
act.
Would you ever go off the air for like 6 months?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that'd be crazy.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe.
People would go through withdrawal.
I don't know. Maybe they'll find somebody else. I think it's the thing about podcasting is it's not any different than anything else. Whether it's music or literature or comedy, there's gonna be more people, you know. And I think one of the real problems with some people and their ego is they really do believe that they're the only one that can do it, or they're the best one that can do it, but I think thinking like that and having that attitude ever at all detracts you and distracts you from the ultimate goal, which is to always do your best. To always do your best is like, you know the 4 agreements, Don Miguel
I've heard you talk about it
Ruiz.
before, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love this book. It's like an amazing book. And one of the 4 agreements is always do your best. Be impeccable with your word. Don't make any assumptions. Don't take things personally. Always do your best. And it's so simple.
Right.
But if you can like live your life like that, even if you haven't up until now, even if your life's been a clusterfuck of terrible mistakes and fibs and lies and deception and just and hating yourself, if you could just follow those 4 things, you could change everything. I really,
said,
really
man.
do genuinely believe that.
Yeah.
I always just try to do my best. And nobody hates my failures more than I do. Like nobody. I think that's one of the reasons why I can keep going. And I don't sit back on it at all. I don't like what I do. I'm not a fan of my own work. You know, I'm just not interested in it. I'm interested in trying to get better at it, but it's not like I ever sit back and watch something. I go, oh, it's pretty fucking cool. I genuinely don't. I think that is completely. I don't think it does you any good. It's either good or it's not. If it's good, congratulations, keep moving.
Right.
That's how I look at things.
Right.
And then I'm also interested in so many other things, you know? Like right now, even though I've got a lot of stuff going on, I'm thinking about this fucking workout I have to do tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, because I know it's coming. And then tomorrow I'm like, oh, Jesus. And then that kind of stuff, like having things that I know I'm committed to, that I know are brutal, and you either do it or you don't do it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Mm-hmm.
Those things keep you grounded. Those things keep you rooted in the reality of the struggle. And I think that if you do, I just think everybody has a different personality. Everybody has a different mindset and a different perspective on life. But from my perspective, with me as a human being, like me personally, I cannot be happy unless I'm struggling. I have to have physical struggle. I have to have mental challenges. I have to have things that I'm doing, that I'm working on, trying to be better at. And as long as I do those things, then I can appreciate all the other things better. Then I'm a more loving husband and father and friend, and I'm better as a neighbor. I'm better at all those things because I take care of all my bullshit. And I think there's a lot involved in that, and health is involved in that too. I think when people don't take care of their health, it's not just bad for them. It's bad for all the other people around you. It's bad for how you interact and interface with the world. It's like you got to do your best with your body too. And if this doesn't just mean just get vaccinated. I mean, Jesus Christ, like take care of yourself.
Yeah.
You got one meat vehicle. This is it.
Man.
It's
Very
the only
well
one.
said. Joe, thank you.
Thank you,
Joe.
Thank you, guys.
I love you, man.
Thank you.
I love you guys too.
Boom.
Appreciate you.
Dude, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.